Welcome to the party. I'm Sam Ekstrom of Locked On Sports Minnesota. Did the Minnesota Vikings get fleeced in the Za'Darius Smith trade? And also, we break down the XFL champion. No, I'm just kidding. We're not going to talk about that garbage.
I'm Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings, and I was looking forward to eating crow on the Arlington Renegades.
This is Arif Hasan with Pro Football Network. I have not watched a snap of XFL or USFL football, and I'm a better person for it.
We'll talk about Arif's redemption from his previous life as a semi-professional football fanatic on today's Minnesota Football Party.
Locked On Sports Minnesota Podcast. It's endless Minnesota Vikings talk with the diverse voices of your local experts. It's time for the Minnesota Football Party. It's your guys hanging out talking next level Vikings football. So join in with Pro Football Network's Arif Hasan, Locked On Vikings Luke Braun, Superior Sports Talk's Luke Inman, and Vikings insider Sam Ekstrom, plus the biggest names in Minnesota football for the Minnesota Football Party. And it starts now.
Fresh week. You're on Locked On Sports Minnesota and the Minnesota Football Party. Sam, Arif, and Luke Braun, all of us covering the Vikings here on the Minnesota Football Party. I'm at Sam Ekstrom on Twitter. Arif Hasan with Pro Football Network. He's at Arif Hasan NFL. And Luke Braun, Locked On Vikings. He's at Luke Braun NFL. Thank you for tuning in. We got a full week of programming coming up here on the Minnesota Football Party, which is brought to you today by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more at FanDuel.com/LockedOn. It's America's #1 sportsbook where you can wager on week 1 betting lines now. Vikings favored by 6 against the Bucks. Get it while it's hot, guys. The Vikings favored by almost a full touchdown in that game. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. On today's show, we'll talk about the Friday news dump. The Vikings traded Za'Darius Smith for a pair of 5th-round picks. We'll talk about whether they won or got fleeced in that deal. We also got some questions about Dalvin Cook. What's next for Dalvin Cook? Is there any chance that he could stay in Minnesota? I kind of doubt it, but we'll dive into that. We'll entertain that possibility. And I also want to get Luke Braun's take on Jordan Addison. He has watched tireless Jordan Addison video. In fact, since the draft, he has not stopped watching Jordan Addison video, and he's going to tell us what he's learned about the Vikings' first-round pick. But let's get into Za'Darius Smith. He is gone. The Vikings have acquired 2 5ths. They've given up a 6th and a 7th. And, oh, yeah, they've also given up Za'Darius Smith. And it sounds like they're taking on some of his salary as well. For anybody, Arif, that thought, hey, the Vikings can get a 3rd-round pick for this guy, didn't happen. Don't know why it didn't happen. Don't know if the Vikings felt like they could draw this out, maybe come to an agreement with him, and it never came together. But I don't think any Vikings fan is really feeling good about the way this all went down with a Pro Bowl pass rusher from last season.
Yeah, I think it's always difficult to project trades. Obviously, I think all 3 of us were kind of incorrect in what his trade price would be, but that was before the draft. After the draft, the market for him dried up a little bit, and I think that is part of it. I think that is just fewer teams need an edge rusher after the draft, right? And so with a smaller market, that's going to happen. With an older edge rusher, that's going to happen. I was just looking over some previous trades for guys that had relatively successful seasons the year prior or during the season. And during the season is a little bit tough because, mid-season trades always occur to teams that desperately, need an edge rusher. It's a little bit different. But, the offseason trade the Colts made for Yannick Ngakoue, who was just coming off of a 10-sack season with the Raiders, right? They traded cornerback Rock Ya-Sin, who I feel like they were willing to cut, right? He wasn't a good corner, right? And so, that is a pretty decent example. Obviously, the Ravens trading for Yannick Ngakoue from the Vikings is a little bit different, but I think that you take a look at 30-plus year-old pass rushers, like when the Bears traded away Jared Allen for a conditional 6th-round pick to the Panthers, coming off of a 6-sack season. And you see that like the market drops off pretty significantly. It's not like the Denver Broncos trading Bradley Chubb to the Dolphins, right? I still think that even with that context, the Vikings probably didn't get out of this trade looking good. I think that the return they got, which was probably equivalent to a sixth round pick or something like that, I don't like. I think that the Vikings had enough cap space this season to get deals done with players like, Justin Jefferson. They did not need, for cap reasons, to trade away Za'Darius Smith. They have all the negotiating leverage in the world if he tried to hold out, because he just incurs enormous fines that the teams are not allowed to forgive. And so, if he's like legitimately threatening to retire, I'd be a little bit surprised by that, but that's the only leverage he has. And so I thought the Vikings were pretty well set up with 3 edge rushers that they'd be able to rotate in fairly frequently to be able to use him effectively, or just negotiate the deal that he might want. And if that's not something that he wanted, obviously that changes things. It's kind of like, when the Vikings were forced to trade Stephon Diggs, there's not really a level of negotiating with him that'll work things out. But I still think the equivalent of a 6th round pick or something like that is a pretty poor return.
Yeah. Braun, the only thing I can kind of project here is that the Vikings must have been a little blindsided by this, because they signed him to a 3-year deal, which for Kwesi, that is a long deal. Like, that is longer than most deals he gives out. And he gave that deal to a 30-something pass rusher off injury, right? So they couldn't have had the expectation that, he'll walk after 1 year, that's fine. Or it's not as if this was a contract year where it makes a ton of sense for Za'Darius to need to do the restructure. So I can't imagine the Vikings really anticipated this being the path they would have to go down.
I don't know about blind. They might have been surprised when he requested his release earlier in the offseason, but after that, it was like, okay, now we've got a situation to deal with after the draft. That contract, the 3rd year of it, always felt a little fake, and it's now been voided out. So I think it was more like a 2-year deal. But the way this reads to me is, I don't think that just forcing him to play on the original deal was much of a consideration. I get what you're saying, Arif, that I guess they probably could have played hardball and forced the issue, and what's Za'Darius going to do about it? But I don't think they wanted to do that.
Why
not? I don't think they wanted to be that disrespectful about it, I guess. Personal reasons, I guess.
Yeah.
And barring that as an option, whatever Za'Darius Smith was demanding was apparently something that was a non-starter, because that contract negotiation didn't last very long. It's not that long after the draft, and we've already got a trade hammered out, that can't have been a very long process. So I think, to me, this reads as Za'Darius Smith didn't like his contract, requested his release, and instead of giving him his release, we eked a little bit of extra value out of that. But it's kind of like cutting but a little better, instead of, hey, we think we can flip Za'Darius Smith for this really great prized asset of 2 5th-round picks. That's not the logic here. The logic is, this current situation is not tenable as is, and the most value we can get, or the highest value option we have, is this kind of trade where we dump most of the contract, and or I assume most of the contract, because if they take on more than $5 million, then that's worse than what they had guaranteed anyways. So I can't imagine that they take on more than that. And then we get a little bit of day 3 capital, which sucks. Yeah, that's awful. That's no fun. But I want to make sure that we are properly considering what the actual options on the table were. And I don't think that forcing him to play through the deal, having him hold out till he retires or whatever, or just being the kind of team that does that to, beloved locker room players and stuff, I just don't think that the Vikings consider that very much.
So the pushback on this is, and I would love it if more teams were more considerate of players, but the pushback on this is that it really feels like, from the Vikings perspective, that they wouldn't really feel obligated to do that, because it felt like they were surprised by what Za'Darius Smith was doing at every possible opportunity. Like when he went public about his desire to be released, right? That sounds like non-conversations with the team, not appreciating the back and forth that, he and the team should have about that, because the Vikings obviously weren't willing to release him, but were willing to trade him. If he had said something along the lines of, I want to be traded, that would still be kind of surprising for a player to make a public statement like that, but it wouldn't be discordant with what the Vikings necessarily wanted, right? It could be something part of the Viking strategy to trade him. Again, I kind of doubt it, but he doesn't seem like he was willing to work with the Vikings. And so it is surprising to me that the Vikings would work with him to get him what he wants at cost. Again, it would be really fantastic if teams did this pretty regularly, if teams were very respectful of what players wanted and needed, if they gave players more power. But there's very little to suggest to me that that's who the Vikings are or have ever been. And there's very little to me to suggest that the Za'Darius Smith Vikings relationship is long enough or good enough for them to do something like that. I think it is much more likely that they were caught with their pants down and needed to make a move. And absolutely, I think it's much more likely. And traded him at cost, right? Like, why exactly was it respectful to trade him specifically to the Cleveland Browns? He's never worked with Jim Schwartz before. Yeah, but why did he pick them?
Probably because they had the best contract on the table. That'd be my guess.
So
it should be mentioned that he changed agents in the middle of this, and I wonder if there's something where the Vikings were working with his agent, but he didn't like what his agent was doing, and he fired his agent. That facilitated a different way. That's totally reckless speculation on my part, but it's worth considering if we're trying to suss out Za'Darius Smith's like actions and intentions here. That's probably
right. I'm just saying it would be unusual for it to be the Browns, because the Browns don't have a ton of cap space to negotiate new deals. They don't seem like an attractive destination for a number of reasons. They, weren't a playoff team. He's never worked with a defensive coordinator before. In fact, there's no one on the Browns staff that I recognize that he's worked with before. And so it wasn't like a situation where, and there's not a lot of former teammates there that he's played with.
Dalvin Tomlinson.
I said not a lot.
Loves Dalvin Tomlinson.
But it would be surprising to me that the Browns were his preferred destination. And so then again,
that was reported by Mary Kay Cabot. That's not like a guess.
I have concerns about that reporting.
It's pretty clear that that dollars were the main motivator here.
That's been the reporting the whole way, that it's always been a money thing.
It's always been about the money. Now, between the money the Vikings are covering and this new deal with Cleveland, 11.75, is that what I saw? Combined,
that's the guarantees. I don't know what the full money contract is, and I don't know what the Vikings took on and all the details of that. There's a bunch of different permutations that could play out that equal that number, so I'm not entirely sure what.
All right, so we don't have an over the cap update, which means we don't have a full contract on Za'Darius Smith. The guarantees, I would assume that he's paying a lot more attention to the guarantees now. Maybe that's part of the reason that he switched agents, because this whole contract thing wouldn't have happened if the Vikings had guaranteed him a lot more money. But the cash in hand that he would get this year, so he was scheduled to get in cash about $5 million this year. No, but probably about 9.5, because he's probably going to hit the other bonuses. So he was scheduled to get almost $10 million in cash, which is not unusual for an edge rusher of his quality. So the cash in hand that he'd have to get from the Browns this year would have to be pretty substantial for it to be a huge upgrade money wise. Obviously, he wanted money. That was kind of the whole point. He wanted to be released for. And the Vikings guaranteed hit goes from 5.5 to 7 or something like that. So, which again, that's not hugely surprising either. So yeah, I just don't know what the money looks like for it to be substantially better for him with the Browns than elsewhere. And, maybe that's a product of his agent having a better relationship with the Browns, or which seems unlikely. Agents usually have pretty good relationships with about 20 or so teams at least. Or what have you. But it just feels like there were a lot of situations where he could have been traded, where he would have earned more money, even if you restrict yourself to outside of the conference.
It definitely had to be guarantees, because with the way his contract looked headed into the offseason when he requested his release was like ripe for the Vikings to come up and be like in like June and be like, hey, take a pay cut or we're going to cut you. And that's the situation that he didn't want to be in. Like there was nothing stopping the Vikings from being there. So my
right. The Vikings were
time,
obligated for $5 million in guaranteed cap hit. That
hadn't vested yet.
Right. And
so he wanted to be he wanted to be released in March when, free agency was going crazy. You could potentially have a better market. That at least was my guess on it versus being approached about a pay cut.
The $5 million was fully vested. The other was it like $3 million
before that
hadn't
day.
vested. No, he had signed for about 6.5 fully guaranteed at signing, 5 million of which were in 2023. Besides, like, obviously, because the rest is the signing bonus and a guaranteed first year salary. So he would have had more vested coming March of the like the normal vesting process, the rolling guarantees. So trying to take a look at this. So it was like $3 million
the money the Vikings are taking on, is that the money that kicked in March? Or is there additional?
In addition to 2, I think.
No, well, that money, if the Vikings did not rework the contract to take on any money at all, that guaranteed salary would have moved to Cleveland. So not necessarily the same money, but I'm sure they take on some.
Well, except the signing bonus, yeah.
Yeah. And the deal that he signed, the environment under which he signed it last offseason was with back injuries and concerns and all this stuff, and it was very much a no,
you're right. Yeah, it was a 5.05 guaranteed for injury until the 23rd of league year. You're right. That had
third day of the
league
until
the third day of the league year.
And it was a provisional deal, which he played the whole year, played every single game, made a Pro Bowl, and I'm sure he goes to that with that leverage and say, "Hey, the circumstances have changed. Let's change things." And I think the Vikings were surprised by the request of release, but they had 2 months since requesting release to trading him to think about what they were going to do. So I think the idea of I just don't want it to be framed as like a panic thing. Like they had 2 months to think about this.
Well, okay. So if the framework of the Vikings doing him a solid was in fact the case, why would they not provide him more guarantee? That sounds like doing him a solid.
Yeah, tear up the third year
solid
and give.
I mean, it is a bigger solid. I agree.
That's a way bigger solid.
but it very much seems like Za'Darius Smith and the Vikings were so far apart that the Vikings. I don't know. Like
the Vikings said, okay,
it seems difficult.
We're
for
not
going to
pay this.
That this
you
is
can find
about
who's going to pay
this.
Solid.
It's very difficult for me to believe that this is about that.
It seems odd that the Vikings
maybe I've oversold how nice it is then, because I feel like that's fairly normal when. You've got a contract situation that has come to a halt. You're not going to sign a contract and you go, okay, you may seek trade partners now. And you can go negotiate a contract with whoever the trade partners are.
But the cost is that the Vikings take on an additional, I don't want to say an additional $5 million in cap hit to get the equivalent of a 6th round pick.
Was there an option not to? What were the other teams? Is anybody just chilling with 12 mil cap space right now that the other teams could have been?
A fair amount. Some of them are in the conference and maybe that restricts it, but I would imagine that there are teams that can use an edge rusher that I don't know what Jacksonville's cap hit is, but there are other teams that can use an edge rusher.
I think it all boils down to that Za'Darius Smith just really adored Ed Donatel and his defense and said, if I can't play for Ed, I don't want to play in purple.
Yeah, so we get AFC teams are like Jacksonville, Cincinnati, Houston. They all have much more cap space. Indianapolis. And then the NFC teams are even better, right? Oh, and Los Angeles has $12.5 million in cap space. Patriots have $12 million in cap space. Ravens could have traded back for him for $12 million in cap space.
Their third rendezvous with Za'Darius Smith.
That'd be funny.
The second one.
That would be a really funny way for this to go down.
Right.
But yeah, so there's 6 or 7 teams at over $12 million in cap space that could use an edge rusher.
Guys, we need to start thinking about Marcus Davenport a lot more, because I think
unfortunately
for a couple months there, we were able to justify, okay, the Vikings have this 3-headed monster maybe, and Marcus Davenport can stick in that third down pass rushing role. Marcus Davenport's career high is 533 snaps in a season. Za'Darius Smith has accomplished that or better in every season since 2017, excluding the season he missed with the back injury. I mean, this is a different type of player. This is not an every down pass rusher. And
to push back on that just a little bit, and I was the one who brought it up when he was signed because I wasn't a fan of the signing. A lot of that was while he was a backup. Like he was a rotational edge rusher for his first 2 seasons. So he doesn't hit 600 snaps. Doesn't bother me. That's not injury related. Now, the next 2 seasons, he was expected to take on a bigger role. He didn't because of injury. That is relevant. But I don't want to overstate the case that, he hasn't played over 600 snaps because some of that had nothing to do with his durability or conditioning. So I just want to push back on that just a little bit, that there is the possibility that for most of his career or for a good chunk of his career, he could have been a 1,000 snap player had that opportunity been available to him.
So let's try to be more specific with it. So Davenport has played 5 or 4 seasons. Let me get this up here. He's played 5.
Oh, it's 5. So he had the 5th year. Yeah.
5 seasons. So in 2 or 3 of those seasons, I think you could probably say he was not blocked by a superior player. He was not a backup, and probably should have earned his way to an every down role. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, for 2 or 3 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think it's relevant to point out that it is, I don't know if disconcerting, but it is another note in his in the scouting report, if you will, that as a first round pick, even if he was like a raw first round pick, right? That as a first round pick, he couldn't, consistently crack the starting lineup enough to get those snaps. But that is a different concern than like 4 or 5 years worth of injury, right? I just wanted to get out that it's not 5 years worth of injury. It's 5 years worth of different circumstances, including injury.
Correct. So Agent Zero, Marcus Davenport, is suddenly a very key figure on this Minnesota Vikings defense. His sack total?
Yeah.
All right, that's the best I've heard today. So the Vikings go from...
It's unfair to bring it up because he got more pressures and stuff, but it's so funny.
It is funny, though. You can't deny that.
Yeah.
I mean, as teams continue to retire jersey numbers and who knows, roster size expanding, I don't know. They might have to start using decimal points. Might be a thing.
Yeah.
Start using halves.
They'll go to hundreds before they do that.
Yeah, they'll go hundreds. They'll start including E and pi, I think, before they use decimals.
Exclamation points. Yeah.
Factorials. Oh my gosh.
Oh,
3 factorial.
A generation too early.
Ampersand. Today's show, well, first of all, let's get into Luke Braun's Jordan Addison breakdown after I tell you that today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. It's America's #1 sportsbook. Get in on the fast break that is the NBA playoffs. New customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 back in bonus bets. Or you could be like Ron Johnson. He went down to Iowa over the weekend, logged into FanDuel, and he claimed the Bet 5 Get 150 sign-up bonus. So they have great promotions at FanDuel as well. It's a safe and secure app. You get paid instantly when you win. You can load up on those same-game parlays. No better way to bet the playoffs than at America's #1 sportsbook. That's NBA and NHL. Big Game 7 tonight, Stars and Kraken. FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. No sweat first bet, up to $1,000 back in bonus bets. FanDuel.com/locked-on. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Luke Braun, tell us about your Patreon, first of all, and then tell us about Jordan Addison, because you did an extensive breakdown of Jordan Addison, and I would love to hear about it. So the floor is yours, Luke Braun. Give the plug, and then let's hear about J.A.
Yeah, you can find patreon.com/Luke Braun NFL. You can find many a film breakdowns from throughout the whole season, a whole bunch of draft breakdowns, including ones on Jaren Hall, Mekhi Blackman, 2 on Jordan Addison. Now I'm trying to get the other draft picks in there eventually too. None of that is behind a paywall.
Are you going to do Ivan Pace and Andre Carter as well?
maybe.
You better.
If I feel like
fun.
it.
You're going to do Najee Thompson.
Najee Thompson. Matt Daniels' guy.
You can show his many great reps at Georgia Southern on special teams.
Give me the tape. I'll do it. Yeah.
I think we do have access to special teams footage, so it's possible.
I have no idea how to find it, but I would be all over that. Yeah.
Before we continue, let's look at his special teams grades in college per PFF. I'm excited because this is your thing, Braun. You've put yourself out there that Najee Thompson is going to make the roster. So
he is not here to play corner. Let me tell you.
Special teams at Georgia Southern.
Right.
He had 874 special team snaps, 92 on kick return, 260 on kick coverage, 199 punt return, 256 on punt coverage, 67 on field goal block. So I'll give it to you. That is a versatile resume, and he's got some very nice looking grades. 7 penalties.
No, he doesn't. What? 60.7 grade? What are you talking about?
When did I say that?
Well, you said he's got some nice looking grades. I took a look at his special teams grade last year, 60.7.
Look at his 5 seasons, and you'll see scores in the 80s.
All right, so 80.4, 70.6, 80.5, 87.8. All right, yeah. If we're counting on his freshman year special teams grade to come through, yeah, I'm absolutely stoked.
All right,
and you can hear him talk about it on Locked On Vikings.
There you go.
But yeah, I did a long Jordan Addison breakdown, which isn't long because it's thorough. It's long because I ramble.
Yeah, no, I've read your writing. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh. Call the kettle black, why don't you? But yeah, I wanted to take another look at Jordan Addison because when I did Addison for Patreon in the pre-draft process, it was one of the earlier ones I did, and I feel like I had learned a lot more. So I wanted to kind of like reapply that now that we know that he's the Vikings guy. And I've like actually went back to a couple reps and was like, yeah, so I was wrong about this. Here's what you should actually be looking for. And the things I really focused on were there's just stuff about his technique that's really cool, that's worth pointing out, that you can kind of like learn from what technique's supposed to look like. Here it is. And the way that he runs routes, like the strategy behind it, the thought behind it, you can see. My favorite example is I think is against Stanford. There's a cover 2 rep where he's running a backside dig, the Seth Galina route. And he makes that, like the way he runs that to fake a corner route, which is going to be something that stresses out the safety in cover 2 all the time. That's like the turkey hole route, right? The way he runs it to make it look like a corner route forces that safety to react, break outside. And then when he breaks to the inside, he's wide open. And that's just, there's this like kind of extra couple layers of thought that you don't see in college, like ever. That's really, really cool to see. And then some stuff about, hey, look, he's a small receiver. He doesn't have elite speed. That's a big concern. How does that manifest itself? What does it look like when you have a small receiver that doesn't have elite speed? What kind of losses does that lead to? And the answer is, hey, if a corner doesn't feel like he has to leave his back pedal because he runs a 4.3 and he knows he's faster than you, so he doesn't have to turn around and bail out while you're still 3 yards away, he can just kind of stand there and play catch technique on you. And if you're small, that's really bad for you. That's catch technique is when you use your physicality. It's almost like playing basketball, where you stand there and you basically take the charge and you say, you have to run through me and I'm bigger than you, so you can't. So you have to go around me. And essentially by just standing here, I have disrupted the timing and pathing of your route. That's something that Addison just has to deal with. That's going to lead to some losses, and it makes it harder the further up in the progression you are. If you're the first read, timing's a lot more important than if you're the third read. So the further up the progression you are, the more sensitive and delicate that is. And Addison can go around. Like, that's not a deal breaker where it is for a lot of the other small receivers in the draft. It kind of was where, like, when Zay Flowers goes around, he just won't restack up back onto his path. But Addison will. And so that's nice, but it's still like not ideal. You would prefer to have someone with either the physicality or, and this is a suggestion I made, the hands technique to be able to get through a guy. But Addison doesn't really use his hands when somebody's got their hands on him. Like, swipe, go break his arm. If he's going to put his arm on you, go break it.
I think his release technique was kind of the biggest concern
Yeah.
about the way his size interacted with the style of play. So, I mean, it's nice to see that like gets matched with someone else looking at it. Were you able to take a look at any of his Blitnikoff year tape in the thing?
I did, but I didn't include it because it felt so much sloppier than the USC tape. It
Really?
felt like which I was really, I was like, this dude is like raw. But then you look at USC and he looks like he's been playing in the NFL for 8 years. He really took a leap at USC in terms of technique and stuff.
Under Lincoln Riley. It's interesting.
Yeah. Right.
That's great to know, because I think people see the raw stats and say he regressed, but no, you're saying that he actually.
I would argue against that really hard. I think he was a much better receiver at USC. And I think when
he had like 110 targets at Pitt and like 60 targets at USC, which I know targets are also a receiver stat, but like I think that is something that you have to take into account when you're taking a look at like the receiving totals. That like the offense at Pitt was about making sure that Addison got the ball. It was a
lot of bubble screens and yak opportunities. And it was like, that was like the point of him for that, which was awesome.
Right. And the offense at USC was like, hey, we've got like an all-star quarterback. We've got the best quarterback in the world, and we'll just let him do whatever. It wasn't about
running more real routes.
Yeah, exactly. So that's something to keep in mind, is that the statistical difference between the two is kind of whatever.
Yeah. And with the Patreon videos too, it's a lot less like I never came. If you go to my Patreon, you watch a draft breakdown, you'll never hear me grade a pick. I'm never going to say that, hey, I think that this guy is, an 80 out of 100 or whatever. Because I want it to be more about like me learning and me learning out loud.
Well, okay, so you mentioned real quick, you mentioned that your initial take on Jordan Addison had like a particular, direction to it, and then you went back and in the interim you learned some stuff. So what exactly so where did you learn it, and what exactly did you learn? Because I know you're pretty open about the resources that you use.
Yeah, I learned it by talking to a wide receiver coach. And watching film with a wide receiver coach. Mm-hmm. And essentially there was a rep that people probably remember against Stanford. That's a post route that he housed for like a big giant bomb touchdown. Mm-hmm. And when I first watched it, I saw a cornerback playing inside the receiver on a post route, and the cornerback cleared him and got open. And I went, oh, his speed must be fine. But what I learned, or what I was wrong about, and what that coach pointed out to me was like, that corner, which is Kyu Blu Kelly, by the way, is totally bombing this play because he didn't respect the speed. He didn't, and a lot of corners play against Addison not respecting the speed, but in this case, Kyu Blu Kelly played it way too far and got punished like crazy because he never came out of his back pedal. He never went into a shuffle. He never, turned his hips and ran until it was like way too late. Ball was a great ball, put right on him, and then he actually broke the tackle and scored. And so to me, that play it's still a good play. I mean, it's a long touchdown. You got to do something right on a long touchdown.
Right.
But
it's good for different reasons, and it speaks to the concerns that. So my question then is the pushback on his combine time, right? Is that, hey, he hurt his back, running it a little bit, and his back tightened up. And so maybe that has something to do with it. And also like PFF had, on some podcast, I think Sam had mentioned that he was like a 90th percentile in on-speed tracking. First of all, I don't know if that's 90th percentile in the NCAA, in the FBS, among draft picks. Those are all completely different data sets. So I don't know what 90th percentile means. Maybe Sam had said, I just don't know. And if it's 90th percentile in the draft class, that makes me feel a lot better than if it's 90th percentile in the NCAA, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And so I'm wondering, right, where you sit on what his true speed is, because that is one of the questions that we kind of have. And I think that one of the signals that you had kind of mentioned is that cornerbacks consistently, they probably respected him as a player, but they didn't respect his speed, right?
They didn't play, yeah.
Consistently throughout the Pac-12 don't respect his speed, he probably was not one of the faster receivers in the Pac-12.
Yeah, and it's different because like when you watch Washington State, they play press bail all the time, and it's like it kind of doesn't matter. You're just bailing immediately every time, no matter how fast the guy is. But then you play somebody else that stays in their back pedal a long time. I'm bad at putting numbers to it, but I'll say when corners disrespected it too much, he could punish it. It wasn't like you would see like when Treadwell played here and you really didn't have to like at all, or when you split a tight end out wide and they can just disrespect that speed all day and there's no way to punish it.
That's not really like the comparison that we're making here, though, right? We're not talking about a guy who's running like a potential 4.7, right? Like
I want to make sure that people aren't making that comparison.
Yeah,
because
okay, so
you hear like speed concerns and people go, "Oh no, he's slow," and that's he's not slow.
His speed is really the concern about his speed is a function of a concern about his size, because historically it's very difficult for smaller receivers to do well without elite speed. Like that is the key. And so if he's an above average receiver in terms of speed, that remains a concern, but it is a different type of concern than the kind of concerns that people had about Anquan Bolden's speed or Jarvis Landry's speed or Laquan Treadwell's speed. It's a different flavor of concern. It's about the combination of who he is as a player, as a complete package, and how he's going to win. And so that's kind of my question. If people consistently disrespect his speed, to me, that tells me that he's probably not an elite speedster. Then the next question is, can he improve his size, right? Because the issue with the size is not his height. It's his muscle mass, right?
It's his physicality. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's a young player. And so in theory, you'd be able to do it. But then you ask questions like, well, he did have good agility. Will he be able to retain his agility as he adds size? And the answer is different for every player.
Here's what I've heard from within Viking circles.
Ooh. We got some
Vikings
sort of insider knowledge. Let's go.
The Vikings believe that the speed is his secret sauce. They think it's elite. They think it's an elite trait. And Kwesi in some ways bought
maybe the undrafted corner played it wrong. Like
who's to say?
Maybe they've talked to Mackay. They talked to Mackay and they were like, hey, what do you think of this Jordan Addison guy?
But before the draft, they talked to Mackay. They're like, hey.
And they had a top 30 visit.
The Vikings do not want Addison to put on more than like 5 pounds. They think 180 is
really.
Yeah,
180 is that's where
like,
the threshold to me would be. I would want him to be at least 180.
And to be super clear about the answer to the question, his speed is fine. I think fine is the word for what I saw on tape. It's generally it's fine. But when you add the size, the fact that, if you're a really, really fast corner, you can play him in such a way that really leverages his size against him. But I definitely get that with the Vikings, because if you bulk him up more, you're going to have like a 190 receiver that is now getting slower. That feels like a worse version of the same thing.
I think what you're going to see a ton early as he maybe does put on 5 pounds and puts on some more muscle, you're going to see him lined up off the line of scrimmage. You're going to see him stacked up.
He's almost certainly going to be a flanker, at least as a rookie.
Or in motion. They're going to find ways to avoid like direct jam coverage, because they would acknowledge that getting off jam with his strength is not going to be a strength. It's going to be, can he get off press with those subtle like back steps, foot movement?
Which being on the same roster as Justin Jefferson, that should help. Keenan McCardell, as far as I can tell, is pretty good at coaching releases. Again, hard to say what the impact of an individual receiver coach has, but they kept him for a reason through the regime. So and seeing what he had done with Jacksonville and the release packages of those receivers, it's an area where I would say if you can identify a technical strength of the staff, that is probably one that they have. But that is an area where, I would want by the end of the year for Jordan Addison to take more snaps than KJ Osborne. But I would also say that KJ Osborne is probably much better for the physical roles that you ask, whether it is in the slot on a play where that there's an option to run, or if it is, on the outside on a motion so that he's got the ability to move up if need be on the motion or whatever. But to keep Addison at the flanker in 3 receiver sets where it's possible to run, or in the slot where there's probably not a high likelihood of running, away from press coverage. Because I think that he could kill in the slot so long as you're not asking him to run block. Like, I think that is
blocking's a huge concern. Yeah. It's ugly.
Yeah. I mean, I would imagine.
Yeah. Like getting blasted by cornerbacks. Like, it's bad.
Yeah, I mean, they have free reign to hit this dude that's been annoying them all game.
Yeah, exactly. And the way he plays it, Because like if you watch like KJ Osborne block, like he'll block like you're my guy and I'm going to go get you, right? He'll go up, get up, engage, get to the right angle and block. Addison blocking at USC was a lot of kind of getting to a spot and then essentially just like taking a charge, like just like kind of squaring up and letting the guy come. And it's like, dude, you are not big enough to do that. You got to go throw yourself into someone. I was joking with the guys, like, we got to show him some Deuce Vaughn tape, because Deuce Vaughn, when he's a lead blocker, he'll run up to an edge rusher that's twice his size, throw everything he's got and pop the guy. How much influence is it?
Right, yeah. What was this 5'9", 170 running back?
But boy, you see the want to.
Well, okay, but there's something there, right? Because when you initiate contact, you've got much more control, as limited as that control may turn out to be.
Inertia is a property of matter. Bill Nye taught me this.
You got much more control on how that interaction is going to play out than when you kind of take on the contact. Plus, you're just going to have a bigger, better influence on the play. So, I mean, you never want your players to play football like they're the nail, right? You always want them to play like they're the hammer.
Which is probably a teachable thing, but also it's like there's not a lot of Jordan Addison to throw around.
Right. But like you could, for example, be like, hey, we're gonna manipulate the formation so that your blocking assignment is, the 180-pound safety instead of the 210-pound safety. Like we're gonna make sure that you're not blocking a 240-pound linebacker, the ones that still exist.
And there's ways to teach him how to win that matchup, close the curtain, all that stuff. The things you teach tight ends versus edge rushers and stuff. Like, you can win when you're smaller than the guy, but you can't just let him come.
Show some Adam Thielen tape. Thielen went after 240-pound linebackers.
Oh yeah.
Usually lost, but who's counting?
But it worked. It's not about winning the individual matchup, Sam.
Yeah.
He showed grit. It's all about grit.
Winning ugly, baby.
My cornerback crush is gone from the free agent market. We'll see if there's anyone else left that I or these guys like that the Vikings could sign. First, a reminder that we are partnered now with SiriusXM. You can hear all the Locked On Sports Minnesota shows on the SiriusXM app or the SXM app. You can also hear all the hometown broadcasts of the local games. Twins Dodgers at 9:10 Central tonight. Twins trying to stay hot. You can search Twins on the SXM app. Shaq Griffin, we barely knew ye. I was all in on the Shaq Griffin bandwagon. I wanted him on the Vikings. I wanted them to take the money from the Dalvin cut or the Za'Darius trade and sign him. And guys, he's going to the Texans. 1-year deal. He's off the market. The Vikings are going to have some money. Not a lot. They have to sign the draft class, but between Dalvin, who I think is inevitably going to be cut, and Za'Darius now, there's something to work with. Is there anybody that catches your eye at corner now that my beloved Shaq is off the market?
I mean, you could always bring in a former Ram, right? That seems to be pretty popular. You could always bring in Troy Hill. He's all right.
Slot guy.
He's a slot guy, primarily slot guy, and he's played on the outside. But he's all right. And I think that you ask him to do anything that a slot corner typically does, and he does it with a fair degree of execution, which I think is maybe a little bit better than what you typically expect at this point in free agency. But the two that catch my eye the most, only one that I actually like, but the two that catch my eye the most are Marcus Peters and William Jackson. Marcus Peters, I think, is visiting Las Vegas today, so they might sign him by the time the segment airs. But I like him a lot. I think William Jackson, we're so far removed from his last good season. It's probably time to kind of give it up on him, but he could play in the slot as well. But Marcus Peters, if the Vikings truly are going to be an off-man team, right? If that is the primary coverage that they choose to play, I can't imagine a better corner for that than Marcus Peters. He's going to gamble a lot. You're going to give up some stuff. He's not as much of a gambler as he was when he was in Kansas City. He did that despite a defense that would in theory do it more in Baltimore. He did it a little bit less personally. It helped that he had a pretty good safety help while he was there. But I like him. I mean, he produces turnovers. He's done a better job, covering from snap to snap. He's an instinctive, aggressive player. Hopefully not so aggressive that he like chokes out a coach on the sideline. You don't want the Washington Huskies thing again, but it's been a while. I'm not going to say he's redeemed himself. He's not been on teams for very long, but he's good. He's good at football. That's the point.
What do you guys think about a guy who turns 34?
Is this Casey Hayward?
Yeah. What do you think about Casey Hayward?
I don't mind an older guy because that room is so young that it feels like a little bit of a veteran presence, a mentorship presence can have value on its own. And also it's a guy to compete against. It's a guy everybody has to beat. And if it turns out that he's worse than all the young guys anyways, and you cut him, like whatever. But I'm not super afraid of being 34 in general. I don't really have a Casey Hayward opinion in particular.
I mean, I can't be afraid of being 34. I mean, that's who I am.
Hayward at age 32 had a very good season for Vegas in 1 year there. He earned a 2-year, $11 million deal in Atlanta because of how good he was in Vegas. And then he got a pectoral injury.
And then yeah.
I'm saying he has not hit necessarily a performance cliff that he's shown yet. He hit an injury, but he has not actually shown that, like, I'm getting old, I'm not good anymore.
I feel like susceptibility to injury is one of the issues with age. I'm going to throw that out there.
Would you rather have Juwan Williams or Casey Hayward on your roster if the price is low?
I mean, if I can just cut a guy without having to worry about it, probably Casey Hayward.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's just kind of funny to stump for. I guess, I mean, the Vikings have they've had that guy for like a while. It was like Patrick Peterson, and then the old guy before that, super old guy,
Terrence Newman, and it's worked out.
Red wine, baby.
Red wine.
Gotta replace him. Gotta replace
Terrence Newman. There's no way you're gonna ask me to coach another year. This is way too much work. That Terrence Newman.
Mike Zimmer literally scared him away from football in any form.
Yeah.
He hasn't surfaced since 2018.
Goals,
he needed a 5-year cooling down window.
What a king.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess they've always had that guy.
Right now, Byron Murphy is the most experienced corner in the room.
That's a little alarming.
That's
he's not that much older than Mekhi Blackman. Luke Braun, did you have a name that you wanted to throw into the hat?
I was gonna say Troy Hill. Again, I'm not like too worried about age, so yeah, Casey Hayward would be fine. William Jackson would be fine. I didn't think a lot about Marcus Peters. I think of him as like a super like cover 3 zone corner. Am I just wrong?
Yeah, you're 100% wrong.
All right, cool. Then Marcus Peters. Yeah, sure. I don't know. Bring in bodies, let him compete. I feel like this is
Eli Apple's available.
Eli Apple. Why not? Yeah. The corner room is just in such a sorry state that I'm still kind of like, well, does he have a pulse? Okay.
Hey, Eli Apple has played in championship games.
And allegedly is alive, so I'm into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think
he is a person.
Once his teammates are done with him, we'll see. But,
Yeah, that would odds on the first training camp fight would be like minus 400. Eli Apple.
Don't forget about Andrew Booth.
Oh my God,
Andrew Booth.
Oh yeah. Oh, he'll
second
fight.
favorite.
Yeah.
If Eli Apple and Andrew Booth are on the same team, yeah, 100% there are fights. The thing is, the Vikings need to start putting a red jersey on Jordan Addison in that case.
Right. We don't want anybody pressing him.
You're absolutely not
into oblivion.
Teach him how to instigate.
Yeah.
Braun, am I selectively remembering, but wasn't Andrew Booth like for 1 week of camp the next big thing? Wasn't he having like one of those Cam Dantzler, August 1st kind of practices?
I think he was fun to watch, but for like good and bad reasons.
Active,
but I don't think
that's for sure.
But I don't think anybody was like, look how well this guy is playing. People were like, oh, this is interesting.
Yeah, well, he did have some really great highlights. If you want to talk about high highs and low lows, his highs were very high. His lows
he couldn't
were
get out of a
that
day
low,
without like
honestly.
3 disasters and 3 awesome plays.
Yeah. But like the like, because I remember like the thing at Clemson that was so astounding was like these one-handed interceptions that he got like pretty close to that in camp. Like, I don't know if there were any one-handed interceptions, but there's certainly like one-handed leaping backwards, impossible angle pass deflections that were pretty fun to watch. And then, Adam Thielen would like cook him right the next play.
I think he got pretty hard against the 49ers if I remember, or was he hurt by then?
No, he was healthy in camp, wasn't he?
Yeah. Pretty sure he had practices against the 49ers. Because I remember thinking, because it wasn't Debo, right? I don't think it was Debo or Brandon.
No.
It was like Trent.
It was the
Sherfield
rookie. Oh God, who's the SMU guy that I was like in love with?
Oh, Gray? Noah Gray?
Yes.
Was that
Noah
it?
Gray?
No, Noah Gray's a Kansas
Sounds like
City
a tight end for the Chiefs.
Yeah. It's Danny Gray, SMU.
Danny Gray.
That's it. Yeah.
Oh my God,
Danny Gray
so
cooked him, and we were like, well, Luke was like, "Hey, Danny Gray's."
Yeah, I was like, my takes.
And I was like, I don't know about that, man. Danny Gray cooked him. I remember that. Danny Gray had like a pretty good moments throughout the season, though. I'll give Luke that.
Still got him stashed on a dynasty roster. I'm not giving up.
Yeah. I'm happy I remember that name. That means I'm still into football. That's good to know.
You're still functioning.
Yeah.
Arif, you covered camp, right? Back with you were still with the Athletic?
Yeah, I didn't switch over from the Athletic to Pro Football Network until the week of the New Orleans game.
Man, I'm gonna miss you this year.
Oh God,
you don't have to lie.
Viking piece.
What? Who am I gonna stand with in the shade over on that hill?
Collar.
Like between the bleachers.
Matthew Collar.
Yeah, I mean, I will, and we'll have fun. But I'm gonna miss Arif and his witty commentary.
No, I appreciate that, Sam. I'll try to insult you less.
Can you make it out for at least one day, like for the sake of
Maybe,
your national coverage?
I'll have to talk to Pro Football Network about whether or not we're going to do a training camp tour. But if we are, I mean, obviously the Vikings would be on the schedule.
Arif, Hasan, Luke Braun. I'm Sam Ekstrom. This has been the Minnesota Football Party today. Tomorrow, Luke Inman rejoins the mix. We'll talk a little bit of draft fallout. We'll talk about his NFL Draft Buzz newsletter. And I think Luke has already got some 2024 draft content in store, so we'll talk about that as well. And as the week moves on, Reggie Wilson, I mean, it's an obsession really at that point.
He's unwell.
2024, May 15th. Reggie Wilson joins on Wednesday, and then Arif and Luke back with us on Thursday's show on the Minnesota Football Party. Please subscribe on YouTube or wherever you find your podcasts. Have a great Monday, everybody.